So we're very fortunate today to continue our conversation with Rachel Fearnley, the CEO of Dreamscapes, who also acted as the president of Stonington Vineyards when we sold the company, closed a few months ago. And we left it off last episode about you thought the deal was done. You signed a letter of intent, right? You felt good about it.
I did.
Right? You worked with us over the years, getting us, helping us rebrand and our messaging and all that thing. Said, okay, here we are. Got a letter of intent, ready to go. And
Yes.
as I always say to our clients, and I think I said in this podcast, when the LOI signed, that's when the work really begins. So
You always say that, and I didn't believe you. I really thought finding the right buyer was going to be the hardest thing, and then, yeah, I was wrong. You were right.
I mean, right. We get into the due diligence process. And what were your expectations? I mean, because I've been through it multiple times. And again, we work shoulder to shoulder, 24/7 with our clients. And we've had a number of calls and meetings on this deal when we were getting it closed. But what were some of the things that you were thinking about that, okay, eye-opening that all of a sudden here we are?
I thought it was going to be a lot more straightforward. I didn't take into account the emotions that were going to be there on both sides. I thought it was like, okay, so due diligence, you're just making sure that everything that you said is correct. They're making sure that everything that they thought it is. I thought it was, I had no idea how much more of a process it was going to be. And how many emotions there were going to be on both sides and how many times I was going to call you and be like, what's going on? I just couldn't understand. And you were like, this happens all the time.
Right.
Just stay calm. I really, and what was interesting was, I've heard you say over the years, there's always things that comes up. There's always issues that arise. And in my head, I thought it was because something went wrong. Right? Like someone on one side was being difficult or something bad happened or whatever. And it wasn't actually that in our case. There were great people on both sides and everyone's heart was in the right place. So how come there was still issues?
Right.
Right? And I think what I learned a lot was how important communication was throughout the whole process and how important it was to have you in on the communication, to calm everybody down, to be able to see where everyone was coming from and just untangle anything that was getting complicated.
Yeah, the worst thing that could happen is silence, right?
Yes.
And I always been doing this for 24 years, and I do the calculus on each deal, and I say, okay, I kind of figure out what to expect, where I need to prepare for, and every deal is different. There's always something underneath the table because it's the emotional aspect. Everybody's individual.
Yeah.
Right. And has different feelings and things come up. So, to your point it's for you to ask me questions, vent your concerns, frustrations, the lawyer's frustration, in this case, the executor's frustrations, and then communicate that in a way to the buyer so we can find a solution to keep things moving along in a way that is acceptable.
Right.
Because, if it's a concern to you, it's a concern to, and there were some things that came up that, that we heard from the buyer side. We're like, what does this mean? And
Right.
then you would pick up the phone and call me and I would say, okay, let me understand what you're talking about. I'll go back. And then sometimes it's just in the wording, the phrasing of it.
Totally. And email is hard,
Right.
So sometimes, it's interesting, even after close. So now Dreamscapes is actually the agency, for
Makes
for
sense.
the new owners. And so we've had candid conversations and it's interesting how from their perspective, how it went and from my perspective, how it went. When I know everyone was trying to do the right thing, but everyone has a role, right? The lawyers have a role. They have to protect their clients. The accountants, all the people have a role. The only one who was really the whole goal was to get the deal done was you, the M&A advisor. I mean, everyone wanted to get the deal done, but you really were the one who had to get the deal done. That was your job. So it was interesting how that all played out. That role ended up being, I think, critical in our deal getting closed.
Yeah. So relationships matter, right?
Yes.
And in order for you to feel, comfortable. We go back, many years for our relationship as partners in the marketing end of Osage. But even if it wasn't us, it was somebody else. Is like you have to lean heavily into that advisory role, and and maybe more than you thought you had to do. Right? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, what do I do here? Right? Because you're a business person. You're very successful, and all of a sudden you're picking up the phone and say, "This is new to me." Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm completely out of water on this one. I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening, or I'm not sure what the next step is. And it's interesting because, sometimes your role would be to make me feel okay. Like, no, I totally agree with you, whatever, let me take care of it. Sometimes it was to tell me something I didn't want to hear. No, you back off. It doesn't matter. Let this play out, or whatever it was. You were very honest. I think that was what I was really appreciated the most, was that I felt like I trusted you, that you were going to take care of it. And if you were telling me something that I wanted to hear and were backing me up, that was great. If you were telling me something I didn't want to hear, I took it to heart, because I knew at the end of the day, you were trying to get it done for everybody. And so that trust, that relationship was key.
Well, that's our business, right? At the end of the day, I mean, a transaction is but it's the trust and open lines of communication. I mean, it's like you can't be a yes person, right? You have to be totally transparent and honest about, no, that's not going to work because X, but let's find a solution that will work, or what the meaning is. And we've had situations in the past and recently where there's been a miscommunication with the buyer and the seller. And so the buyer, my client, the seller, calls me up and says, I don't understand this, blah, 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 this and that. So let me find out.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And you did a lot of that, and you also, one thing that was interesting to me was we had the lawyers had to get involved early, obviously, when you're doing contracts and all that other stuff, right? But at some point, and I think it was you that made the suggestion, let the lawyers do what the lawyers do, but then let's have ongoing communication with you and the buyer.
Right.
And let's not have the lawyers involved in that. And sometimes you were a part of those conversations just to be like a neutral party. And sometimes it was just between the buyers and I. And we did that on a regular basis.
Right.
Those meetings were on a regular basis. I think you set the cadence of that early. And that made a huge difference. It built the relationship between us. We were able to express needs and concerns on both sides. It totally changed the direction in terms of how that happened.
Yeah, the lawyers serve a very important role in papering up the deal.
Yeah.
Meet your goals, right, and protect you.
Mm-hmm.
But there's business decisions that have to be made.
Right.
Ongoing through due diligence. And the lawyers are going to look at the risk attributes of those. And then as a business owner, or in this case, representing, you need to look at the risk reward and how important is that to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll give you we had a situation years ago where a client, a lawyer brought up a situation, well, what happens if this happens? And I said, John, how many times have you been sued on that in 35 years? He goes, never. I said, okay. Yeah. What does that tell you? Yeah, got it, right? So you need to pick your fights and your battles when you need to. And sometimes you let things slide by because it doesn't really matter.
Yes. And you said that a lot. There would be times that you're like, it doesn't matter. And I'd be like, yeah, but, and you're like, it doesn't matter. Okay. And you're right. You're right. You really have to keep your eye on what's important and not get caught up in some of the little details that don't matter. And I think to the buyer and seller, a lot of things matter, and so sometimes weeding out what's important and not important is a bit of a challenge when you're in that moment. And you and your team were really great at just keeping us all focused on what was important and how to get to close. That was the goal.
And as we're going through that communication directly with the buyer, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that, kind of like put you on pause, cause you concern, maybe felt frustrated with because they weren't moving quick enough? How did that play into your emotional state? Because you're not the seller. You are the seller's agent because it's a trust, right? In this case. So it's a lot different than working with a business owner, but you're trying to do the right thing. So
totally. And I think, I originally agreed to stay on for a year.
Right.
And by the time it was all said and done, it was over 5, right? So there was a piece of it for me that was like, I'm not supposed to be here anymore. I mean, I have my own company to run, and and I wanted to get it done. I was very lucky that the buyers are incredible people. So dealing with them, I mean, they're just absolutely wonderful people. But things that took us both by surprise were like how long the permitting process took, right?
Right.
I think they were looking to me a little bit in the beginning, but I hadn't done it in 25 years, right? And it's the kind of thing you do once and then you're done. So it changed over the years. So I think what took us both by surprise was how long the permitting took. And that had to become the focus because, I mean, that set the tone for the whole deal, right? So when the buyer first was interested, they were like, oh, we could do this, quick close, great.
Right, they're funded, had the money,
They
ready
were
to go.
all set. I mean, they were good. And then we were both like, oh, wait, it takes months to get these permits done. And it's hard.
Yeah, you had to bring an outside consultant.
Totally. They brought
a couple of them, right?
Yeah, totally. So I think they were all of a sudden this dream that they had, because no one has to buy a winery, right?
Right.
So this dream that they had really quickly became not fun because all the stuff that went along with the permits. And I was on the other side trying to make sure that we were checking all the boxes as much as we could for what we needed to do, right? Inspections, because there was a real estate part about it, and making sure that we were, all the things, environmental, and getting all the things done that we agreed to in our contract. And so we were kind of working in parallel, trying to get them whatever information they needed to get the permits. But that was stressful for both. We were on the same team, and I feel like at that point in trying to get it done, but we were all taken aback by how long that took.
Yeah, and as time goes on, frustrations rise. I mean, we always talk to clients, try to nip things in the bud. Like again, get the environmentals done early, get the inspections done early, get your get all these things, get everything, your ducks in a row, right? But there's always something in every deal that kind of can postpone and delay it. In this case, it was a regulatory requirement that people, 20 years ago, you file the paperwork and you got it back 3 days later. Now, 25 years later, it becomes this huge undertaking of like you're doing a phase 2 environmental on your property. But the frustration levels were increasing because it kept on delaying and delaying and delaying. But eventually, as we said, the line of communication stayed consistent, open, honest, and you were able to, get this thing to closing, right? So,
yeah,
so now you're a seller, right? Kind of.
Yes,
right?
kind of.
First time, there'll be another selling down the road. But if you were giving any advice, you're talking to people as a seller. What are some of the takeaways you would have to give some advice to our audience about things to think about that you normally doesn't come top of mind? It's like, it's kind of like, it's not in the textbooks. It's not in the articles. It's not in the papers. It's not in Chat GPT or whatever. What are the things would you advise people on?
There's a few for me. Number one is timing in the sense that it takes way more time than you think. So I was happy that I engaged you early. I think that was so key in how we ended up with the right buyer at the right time. So I think start way earlier than you think. If you hire M&A and when you're ready to go on the market, you're behind the 8 ball. So I think realizing how much time it's going to take is an important one. Patience. I can't stress enough how, as the seller, and I'm sure as the buyer, the most stressful part is a deal's not done until it's done.
Right.
And so the longer it takes, the more nerves you have because you're like, we're just opening ourselves up for something else to go wrong, right? They're going to find something they don't like. Finances are going to change. The world is going to change. I mean, who knows, right?
Your mind starts to wander and the anxiety levels increase, and it's not a healthy situation.
It's not. And you're so far in and you realize that like, if we start all over, we have to go through this all over again. So the longer it goes on, the more nervous you are. And that doesn't help. So I think, I can't even imagine if we had done this on our own, or worse yet, if we had gone a different path, if we had gone through a broker or realtor, something different. The focus on a person on M&A and having an advisor who understands the business of selling a business was key. And so, to be able to just go back to you at any moment when I was having that, well, either side, really, if I was feeling it from them or if I was having it myself or I was feeling it from the attorney, and there was those nerves would come up or something would be frustrating, to be able to have someone that you trusted, to be able to be like, okay, this is normal. Because you do this all the time. As a seller, you're doing it, once, maybe twice in your lifetime?
I remember this conversation we had. He says, this is what you do for a living?
Oh my God. That was the moment that it went from like, we market you, we do your web, and I listened to all of this, but I'm like, there is so much psychology in what you do. And this is what you do all the time. And there's you're always on the phone. I see that happening, but like there's, not an emergency, but there's always something that's happening that could derail a deal, right? I mean, there's always something that's happening that can happen. And I just felt like you were, how when we were doing your website and we were talking about the calm and the storm,
right,
and we used boat visuals on your material and your website because of that visual of a calm in the storm. Never did I realize how right that was until I was going through it from the seller side. That ability to kind of keep your eye on the horizon, weather the storm, keep steady on course. Like that is it. That is exactly what it is.
Well, that's what we've been striving for working with clients for 24 years now. And any final takeaways on the reflections now that the deal's closed and it's in the, I would say, the proper hands of the right buyer, who, by the way, for everything we've done and going around the whole world, I literally can walk to their house from my office.
Yep.
I mean, who, right?
They're in our town.
You never know.
I know. It was so crazy. I have never in my gut felt more right about who is now continuing the legacy of this property. They are, this couple, they're fantastic. And it's really the wife that's running it because the husband is still extremely engaged in his existing business. But for her, it was the right time. She was transitioning out of her career and was looking for her next thing. And she's just a dynamo and she just cares so much and is so thoughtful about what made that place special and wanting everyone to feel included on the journey forward and caring about the customers. The whole staff stayed on, caring about the team. I can't say enough how the end result is better than I could have imagined. And if I had given you, I did give you everything in my head, every checkbox I had, it's better than that.
Right.
So the end result, and you've said it all along, you'll get there. It'll happen. This is part of it. And I think we have to just trust the process and know that in the end, I think that the winery has a really bright future with wonderful people involved, and it's exciting.
Well, we're excited the deal's done, and we believe also it's in the proper hands. Moving on to bigger and better things, moving forward. But we have the beneficiary of the trust is excited. The executor is excited. You did a wonderful job. Rachel Fearnley, CEO of Dreamscapes and former president of Stonington Vineyards. Thank you for being with us, share your story and your journey through the sales process.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
It was terrific. Again, my name's Keith D., President of Osage Advisors. Thank you for being with us today for the ins and outs of selling a business. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more about Osage, you can visit our website at osageadvisors.com. Any questions, feel free to email me at kdee@osageadvisors.com or pick up the phone and give me a call at 860-767-3273, extension 1001. Thanks again for being with us. Have a great day.